Welcome to the High School Huddle Norman and Moore edition. I'm Ryan Aber, joined today by Justin Harper. Justin, a lot going on in your region. The big talk this summer has been about Southmore. They were 2-8 last year. How good is this team going to be?
Well, it's hard to say how good they'll be because they had a lot of this talent last year. And, they started out winning 2 of 4 games, and people were really surprised, but then they got the injuries. But I would be stunned if they weren't considerably better than 2-8. They've got as much individual talent at the skill positions as any team in the Metro. And, they have it on offense and they have it on defense. Their coaching staff is treating them like a team that's, not 2 years old, but a team that's been around, and they're also treating them like a team that didn't just win 2 games last year. So there's a lot of confidence there. There's a lot of good players, and then not only do they have the good players from last year, but they've got an infusion from several move-ins.
And I don't think there's a whole lot of questions about how good this offense is going to be. It's going to be exciting to watch. But there are some question marks with the defense.
Well, Julian Wilson, of course, is their top player, and he's on defense. So, that's a good place to start. But, yeah, they're going to have to work on the defensive front. But like we were talking about the move-ins, they got a kid from Centennial that was an offensive lineman, and Ryland Widener, yes. And he was at 325, dropped 50 pounds over the summer, moved from offensive line to defensive line. When you have a kid that can do something like that, I just expect he's probably going to be pretty good.
And Southmore this year is in a position that Norman North has been in the last couple of years. You talk about a collection of talent. A lot of that talent has moved on for Norman North. How do they rebound, and can they be in the same ballpark as they have been in the past couple of years?
Well, Lance Manning thinks they can be a better team. He's not going to sit there and say that people they have now are better than the people that just moved on, because those were the best players in school history.
When you talk about Tyler Templeton and Bo Blankenship and that group.
Right. But he knows that they did a lot of things that made mistakes, maybe weren't as aggressive as they could have been offensively in some cases. He says all the time, we can be a better team now by doing things differently. And the players are really anxious to make their own name, and they've waited their turn. Like running back Chris Riley, he's been around for a long time, ran for 200 yards against Muskogee as a sophomore. So it's not like this kid isn't really good. People have been waiting to see him, and he's not even running first string. They have a guy named Jamar Harrison who's ahead of him. So Norman North has talent. Manning has built that program up to where he can reload, and it'll be interesting just to see how they carry themselves on the field on Friday nights, because the talent's there. It's just a matter if they have the attitude.
And across town at Norman, I think the big question is, can the Tigers find some offense?
Yeah, that's the only question that matters right now for Norman. Last year, they struggled so much offensively. They had 4 games where they didn't even score 10 points, and they just had so many troubles. They were bouncing back and forth between quarterbacks, one that ran and one that passed. Well, the guy who ended up starting, Chad Anderson, is the quarterback this year, and he's the thrower. He can do a little bit of both, but he's a big, tall kid who can deliver the ball. He's got a good group of receivers. But the main thing is that if kids have been in Greg Nation's offense for a year, and they're sort of adapting to it. Last year, that was the big problem. They just didn't. It never clicked. Not even in the 2 games they won did they really feel like everything was going great. So that's the biggest difference. They at least feel like they're in the mold of what Greg's looking for. So that should help.
And in Moore, you look at the other 2 schools, Westmore and Moore. Westmore with a coaching change really late in the offseason with Mike Whaley moving on to the OSSAA, and Moore just really had a tough season last year. Can these programs bounce back?
Well, Westmore, it was a late coaching change going to Chad Davis, and people have automatically thought, well, wow, Chad's this throwing quarterback. He's a former quarterback, and he likes to throw the ball, and Westmore's lived off the pound of the ball, smash mouth offense for so long. But the thing is, it actually was a switch to the spread that Whaley made last spring. So
he had brought in Chad Davis before he left. Chad had come on as offensive coordinator.
Right, and they made the switch, and they were working spread all spring. So it's not just these kids aren't coming out right now and just in shock. They worked all spring on it, and so I think they're going to adapt pretty well to it. Now, on the other hand, they are getting away from the total nothing but run ball control. They're going to throw the ball some. but they're still going to try and control the clock. I mean, it hasn't changed that much. They're going to run one back, and they're going to run the spread, but they're still going to try and keep the ball for long periods of time, and then they're still going to run the same defense. So it's not going to be as drastic of a change as people think. I think they'll adapt pretty well.
And in more, this roster, when you look at it, looks awfully young. Can they find some of those experienced guys, and do they have guys that can step in and at least act like they're experienced in games?
Well, they are experienced. That's the thing. They are super young. They only have 13 seniors, which is just amazing for a school the size of Moore. But they have 25 to 30 sophomores and 35 juniors, I think. And the coach, Scott Myers, made a good point that last year he had all these sophomores and juniors playing, but the juniors were guys who had never played before. This year, there's a lot of sophomores playing again, but they're playing along juniors and seniors that have played quite a bit. And so there will be people out there to help the young guys along, but there's no getting around the fact that they're an incredibly young team. It's going to be a learning season again, but it really shapes up well for next year. I mean, you hate to, before the first game, say wait till next year, but on the other hand, with how many kids they'll have coming back next year that have played 2 and 3 years, it'll shape up well for them. But, yeah, they're going to be a really young team.
Well, Justin, we appreciate you joining us, and thank you. And join us next week for a Norman Moore edition of the High School Huddle. And check us out every day of the week at newsok.com/varsity for the best high school coverage in the state.